high-quality bedding at low-cost prices, you're bound to sleep soundly at the new look Des Kelly Interiors.
Generally dry and clear tonight. There will be some patchy rain and drizzle with lowest temperatures overnight of 3 to 7 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
Off the ball.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a dedicated call centre.
This is News Talk.
Hello there, you're welcome along to Monday Night's Off the Ball. It's Joe here. The Dubs are celebrating 4 in a row at Smithfield around about now. We'll bring you reaction from Jim Gavin, Philly McMahon, Brian Fenton, Mickey Hart speaking afterwards and this morning. Analysis to come after 8 o'clock from Enda McGinley and Billy Joe Padden. Meanwhile, it really does seem as if something has upset Harry Arter. That something seems to be an altercation with Roy Keane, or it's certainly one of the factors. We'll play you what Martin Neal had to say exactly today in Dublin, and we'll check in with the Daily Mail's Philip Quinn on the football show as well. Pat Nevin will also join us to reflect on the weekend's Premier League action, and Rory O'Connor as well from the Irish Independent on the Pro 14 opening weekend. Text number 53106. We're on Twitter at Off the Ball. Richie McCormack here in studio. Hello.
Hey, Joe.
And we have Kieran Cunningham from the Irish Daily Star. Kieran, thanks for coming in.
No problem.
Stealing. But it's all over! Dublin have won the All-Ireland for 2015. It's taken them 2 tremendous games, but they have retained their title. A truly remarkable achievement. And Dublin are again the champions. The 3 in a row. All along the banks of the Royal Canal.
My defense is impregnable. Prove to everybody in the world that I am the best. Nobody can touch me.
Kaliski's just scored from a place ball, and he is now put one over the bar from play. Tyrone are very much on top in this All-Ireland final.
5-1 down, double player didn't blink, and that meant resolve.
And it's a penalty awarded by the referee against Morgan. 21 minutes into this All-Ireland, and he buries it. Top corner, unstoppable.
Look, we're just trying to knock them down as they come. I don't know if we're counting. We got a decent performance today, but as I say, when we look back, and we probably do a bit better.
O'Callaghan, who's getting a lot of ball now. O'Callaghan towards goal. He's brought down. No penalty, but it is a goal. Tapped in with the hand by Niall Scully, and suddenly Dublin now lead by 5. He knows how to score from this sort of range. Hart against Cluxton, buries it.
For me, I wasn't thinking about winning at all this week. All I was thinking about was what's my performance going to be, what am I going to do in the performance. That's the process.
Molloy heading towards goal, uses the hand and over it goes. The lead is 6, and Dublin are home and host.
Final whistle went. How did you feel? What were you thinking?
To be honest, I was thinking about my dad. You know, my dad unfortunately passed away this year, and even though he wasn't there in physically he wasn't there, he was there in spirit. So, you know, when that happens, you're just looking to the family and seeing the joy that you bring to your family's faces in such a tough year for us.
It's all down to the referee, and the referee has decided enough is enough, and the 4 in a row has been achieved by Dublin. 6 All-Ireland titles in 8 years.
Yeah, Dublin 217, Tyrone 114. That was the story of yesterday. Beautiful work from Richie McCormack. Our calf doffed in your direction.
Cheers, man.
Kieran, you were there.
I was.
17, 18 minutes in, Tyrone 5 points, Dublin 1 point. Thoughts then?
I thought, I wouldn't say I thought that Tyrone were going to make a game of it. I was hoping then that there was signs of it being a serious game. But what happened didn't surprise me in the slightest, that it changed so quickly, because Dublin have that in their locker, that they think their way through games and they think their way through problems that are presented to them. And the high aggressive press of Tyrone had presented them with problems. But I think that kind of press, every team has problem with that. Like if you see that with the overhead camera now, what the goalkeeper is faced with, and you go, it's not bloody easy. Like Cluxton messed up 2 kick-outs, but I think that was all he messed up in the whole game. He got a grip of it then. It was partly because they went with 6 forwards then. So Tyrone had been pushing up 10 or 11 players, and suddenly they couldn't do that anymore. And I think it turned, with one of the best kickouts I've ever seen. When they went 5 points to 1 up, remember he hit Jack McCaffrey on the run, Cluxton, and it just beautifully flighted. Caffrey was at full pace and he just ran onto the ball, and Kieran Kilkenny's point came from that. Straight after then was the penalty, and it just turned. They'd gone 17 minutes without scoring Dublin. I think then in the space of 4 minutes they scored 1-3, and the game was over, irrespective of the late rally. I don't think anyone thought Dublin are going to blow this. Like, the game was over.
No, 2-4 in 13 minutes is also what Dublin managed. And so we went in at half-time. Dublin were up by 7 at half-time, and really the second half, up until the Peter Hart penalty, was just the story of either a 6 to 8 point bubble.
Yeah.
And it would just oscillate in between, maybe 7 points.
It's funny, we could be here all day talking about the positives of Dublin and the strengths and the greatness of this team, but the day actually showed up a couple of flaws as well. Like, they have a couple of issues that'll be interesting to see how they address. Like, Philippe McMahon struggled, and he's been struggling for most of this year, I think. And Cian O'Sullivan, I think Cian O'Sullivan's partly can be injury related because he's had a lot of problems in recent times, but he was all at sea before he did go off injured. And if you look at their strength and depth that we look at, like their forward line now, the age profile has gone way down. Its average age 23, 24, which a few years ago it was the forward line of the two Brogans, Flynn, Connolly, Owen O'Gara, and they've all been moved aside, and a new breed has come in. But if you look at the defence, like Darren Daly has played in all the All-Ireland finals, gone back to 2011, but he's only got 10 minutes in each of them. But he still comes on. He's still the defensive sub coming on. Michael Fitzsimons has been coming in and out of that defence for 7 or 8 years now. So they could do with unearthing a couple more defenders, because like the younger guys that are in the bench, in the squad that we've seen this year, is like Colin Pascal, Cormac Costle, not that young, but he's at injury problems now. He's kind of like a new player for them. And Conor McHugh, and they're all forwards. So I think they might have to think outside the box. Like possibly James McCarthy could end up having to do the Cian O'Sullivan role, and they'd move Brian Howard either to the half back line or midfield, where he's well capable of playing. He's an outstanding player. Yeah, that's it. It's not hopeless. Owen Merchant's come in and done just fine. And he's been really good. Like he has been fine. But the problem, there is an issue with him. I think he's so suited to Tyrone because of the size of their players. But like Merchant is 5'5". I would say he must be the smallest intercounty player in the country. And Tyrone always has small forwards, like they put him on Ryan McHugh. He was suited to Ryan McHugh. They kind of more or less broke even in that game. But there are other teams, and you go like against when he was putting Ian Burke against Galway, he was struggling. Like when there are teams that don't have a small nippy forward, you'd wonder. But like the likes of Kerry, I think Merchant as a matchup on Paul Murphy. Even though Paul Murphy plays in the half-back line, but he's more or less a playmaker for Kerry. He could be very effective. So he's a great plus. Him and Howard, 2 great pluses this year, plus getting Costello back.
I've seen 2 genres of article today, one being, let's celebrate this brilliant Dublin team, and the other being, well, it was a fittingly insipid end to an insipid championship, and frankly, the Dubs are going to dominate for a long time, and we need to be a little bit worried here.
Well, see, if you bring up that you're worried, Dublin, some people in Dublin take it as knocking Dublin or you're anti-Dublin, whatever. But from the GA point of view, like Kerry will, because of their nature and what they're coming through, Kerry will win All-Irelands. But the rest are looking at very slim pickings over the next foreseeable future. That Dublin will dip. Like Dublin aren't going to win the All-Ireland every year, but anybody who thinks it's cyclical is deluded. No, that doesn't work. Just because Kilkenny had a great team and they didn't build it, but Kilkenny didn't have this base that Dublin have, where everything is in place, a really strong county board, sponsors prepared to put in a lot of money. They used the grant money they got very well. They have the numbers in terms of players. They have really, really good coaches who are putting in serious work in the schools and the clubs. And why would you suddenly blow that? And the other thing is, Dublin deserve huge credit. This is all rooted in the appointment of Pat Gilroy and Mickey Whelan. And that was the most left field punt going. Like, I was looking back on it today, looking into the betting at the time had like Mick O'Dwyer and a couple other Kerry men, Brian Mullins, a host of ex-Dublin players. And you go down to 50 to 1, like there was about 15 names listed off. Gilroy's name wasn't mentioned. Like, no, he wasn't mapped. But so he came in with virtually zero experience. He'd done a little bit with Trinity and I think briefly with Vincent's, and then at underage level with Vincent's. And he brought Mickey Whelan in with him. And when Mickey's 2 years in charge, 96, 97, he was derided. He walked away after being spat on and abused at a league game in Parnell Park against Offaly. And these were the two guys that changed the culture. Like Jim Gavin deserves huge credit. But they changed the culture. They changed what it means to be a Dublin footballer. Like, I remember this. I was digging it out today.
Yeah, go on. I was just going to say, it took that old school Dublin approach. It took Dublin players even about 10 years to catch up to what Mickey Whelan was advocating.
Yeah, absolutely. But not just from a coaching point of view, because I was looking at this today. Dublin beat, in his second year in charge, Gilroy's second year in charge, they beat Tipperary in a qualifier, and TV3 had the rights then. And David Brady and Eugene McGee were on analysis duty.
If you say one bad word about Brady, you're
No, I won't, but David Brady described Dublin that day as Hollywood footballers. Eugene McGee that day said they're more interested in product launches than football.
That was the narrative around them. Yeah, absolutely. And that whole playing to the hill thing, that really, every single part of that was something that needed to be eroded.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Remember marching to the hill hand in arm in arm, like all that nonsense. But it's fun.
It was almost like what Stuart Lancaster did with England.
Absolutely, because
stripped away all the nonsense.
Yeah, he did. Because David Hickey had a great line in this, because David Hickey was brought in as the team doctor under Gilroy, and he'd given an interview to the Irish Medical Times, and after they'd won the All-Ireland 2011, and he said, Pat Gilroy, he said, Dublin used to be the premiership experience in Ireland. It was white boots, waving to the hill, the cult of the individual. He says, Pat Gilroy is the most unlikely communist in Ireland, if you know his background. He says, but he brought communism to the Dublin team. And there's something to that. It's a collective. It's now a collective farm, basically.
Yeah, no, they're fairly phenomenal. So we'll hear from Jim Gavin. We will hear from Philly McMahon. You heard a glimpse of it there when he was talking to Maura Taras in the montage. It's been a very difficult year for him off the pitch. Brian Fenton as well. And we'll play the thoughts of Mickey Hart. Hart was certainly ruining some of the decisions they made. Like when they were really dominating in that first 17, 18 minutes, they had 6 wides as well. They kicked some bad wides and they were playing some great stuff. I thought they were like very aggressive kick passing, going the length of the pitch in 2 or 3 good Kerry-esque, one bouncing into the chest kind of kick
But
passes.
I thought their post-match quotes were quite interesting, particularly Colin Kavanagh, because he basically said, we panicked. He said, we didn't expect it. Their plan was keep it really tight for the first 15, 20 minutes and like just hang in the game. But he says suddenly we were 4 points up.
Yeah, what do you do?
I think the one thing they hadn't planned for was we're going to be we're going to be well on top.
Well, when they went 5-1 up, I said, what are they going to do now? I honestly thought, I crossed my mind. I was like, should they try and shut up shop at 4 points up? Should they try?
Well, Jim McGuinness would probably advocated that in his column a couple of weeks ago.
Just to rattle Dublin. Imagine Dublin being even 3 points down at half time. Just to, could you just try and hang on for as long as possible then? But look, I mean, what do you do?
But they just did, they did so many things wrong after that. Like there were so many unforced errors, snatching at shots. Shooting from positions you shouldn't shoot from, and compare that to Dublin. Second half, Dublin didn't have a single wide. The 2 dropped short. They just work at they're so patient. Like there was one Brian Fenton point, and I would say they'd 40 passes before. It went back, over and back, over and back. And it just once they have the open, and then it goes over.
No, I mean once they even went to point ahead, the game was on their terms. I mean you could just see the light. I mean, what was it Mourinho said last week to Jeff Shreves? He said, I don't know if you've played, Jeff. You probably haven't, but goals are like vitamins, and you could see. Just something went out of Tyrone when they were a point down, 2 points down. It was just a different game entirely, the whole feel of it.
But what strikes me as well about Dublin is Tyrone put huge thought into their matchups, right? And it struck, and basically the matchups went on Tyrone's terms. Like who Tyrone wanted to put on people, Dublin let them go. And that struck me as huge confidence in that Dublin setup. They say, okay, we'll just go with whatever you're throwing at us. We're not that bothered about getting this guy off this guy or whatever.
Dublin won the All-Ireland easily without a player of Diarmuid Connolly's class. Would he have even gotten into the team for the final yesterday, Sean Meath? Yes, he would have.
That's a
scary prospect is Connolly coming back focused and hungry and part of a 5-in-a-row tilt next year for everybody.
Or wanted.
That could be the X factor, because a lot of people were saying to me he won't bring him back, but no, the more I think about it, like you need an extra spark every year, and that could be the spark.
But does that go against his, collective spirit?
Well, he was there up till this year, up to that last year when he was suspended. He was the only player who played every minute of all the All-Ireland finals that won. So they always trusted Connolly, and he was his vice captain for 4 years. So
The news round is brought to you this evening with Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products. So the two big stories yesterday and today have been 4 in a row for Dublin, and it seems Harry Arter has ruled himself out of international football for certainly the short term.
Yeah, Martin O'Neill says an altercation with Roy Keane may have informed Harry Arter's decision to take a break from international football. The on-loan Cardiff midfielder wasn't included in the trimmed-down Republic of Ireland squad for the Nations League opener with Wales, which is live on Thursday's Off the Ball, and the friendly with Poland. Last week, O'Neill confirmed that Arter did have an altercation with assistant manager Roy Keane in June before the friendly with the United States, but added that the situation had been diffused at the time. But today, O'Neill wasn't denying the Keane factor in Arter's decision.
That may be part of the reason, yeah, it could well be, and I wouldn't deny that, that's the case. But he's got a number of things to consider, obviously. He's got a fresh start at Cardiff now, where Bournemouth were happy enough to let him go out on loan, and it's a start for him again. So there's a number of reasons, but I wouldn't deny that would be not one of them.
Yes, so I would suggest it's the key reason. Like, the thing that strikes you when he talks about Arter and wanting to sort out his club career, he has sorted out his club career. You know, like, he's not in the midst of a move, he's moved. Yeah. He's played a couple of games, 3 games I think for them in the Premier League thus far. He started every game.
Started yesterday.
Yeah, against Arsenal, yeah.
And so that's back in good shape.
Yeah.
And this game against Wales, this isn't a case of a 12-hour flight to Russia and then back again. He lives there. Yeah. He will literally not go to the Poland game is going to be like a second
He'll drive
squad.
to the training ground.
Yeah.
He will go from the ground afterwards back to his bed. Yeah. So in terms of logistics and what this might take out of him, none of that washes. The club career is sorted out.
I don't think
there was talk of, like he said, maybe he's looking to get back proper fitness. Again, if he plays on Thursday, then he goes back to Cardiff. He gets a full week. There's an international break, so he can spend a full week after the Wales game working on his fitness. So this looks to be 99.9% to do with the altercation with Roy Keane. Yeah,
absolutely. I agree, Joe. And I think you can't overstate how big a loss he is, because even though people say, he hasn't been brilliant for Ireland, but in terms of you have 14 players between midfield and striker in that squad for the Wales game, only one is playing the Premier League, Jeff Hendrick. There's very few Irish Premier League players left. And yet, I think you have to ask the question now, is Roy Keane more trouble than he's worth? Like, what is he bringing to the setup? Because there's just the amount of times that there's just this, it seems to be international weeks are bordering chaos often because of stuff that's happened around him. Like, go back to the very start, the games against Germany and Gibraltar, a couple of years ago, and they were just dominated by the launch of his second autobiography and a lot of interviews around it and a lot of stuff that was coming out from that book. You remember before the Scotland game in Glasgow, which was a huge game, the altercation, which is word of the day, with a guy called Frank Gillespie in the bar at the Portmarnock Hotel over getting a book signed. And then remember the flirtation with Celtic. Like, he often talks about commitment and players need to be, he questions others' commitment, but he had this very open flirtation with the Celtic job. And then he took on an assistant manager's job with Aston Villa while with Ireland, which was surely a distraction. Plus, he has an ongoing punditry contract with ITV. And I just think, how the hell did this happen? Like, how can you allow this to happen? Well, in fairness, you can't blame Martin O'Neill for it, because that's just Keane's personality. But he has this combustible, abrasive personality, and it's been there all through his playing career. And part of it, I think, as well, he reveres the world of Brian Clough and Alex Ferguson. Brian Clough once punched Roy Keane in the dressing room. Ferguson was known for the hairdryer treatment. A lot of stuff that Clough and Ferguson did back in the day, I think you'd be up before an employment tribunal now if you tried it. That you can't work like that with modern players.
Have you ever ascertained what Roy Keane brings from a planning and tactical standpoint to the Irish setup?
No, well, if you ask players, it's very vague. It's very vague what his role is.
It seems that should be key. The nature of the altercations with Walters and Arter both seem to centre around time spent on the treatment table. That's what's leaking out. Walters is more than big enough to stand up for himself and seems to, this is a man, you think of Walters and he's bollock naked in the Stoke dressing room face to face with Tony Pulis.
Yeah.
So maybe he's of that vintage where we have a good scrap.
But this brings up, we always end up going back to Saipan because Saipan all blew up over him being accused of feigning injury.
Well, that's the irony.
So now he's accusing somebody else of feigning injury.
Yeah, that's the irony. And he spent a lot of his career, the latter half of his career with Ireland, not partaking in every training session, and people said that's fine. And now it seems he's called out Arter and called out Walters for being on the treatment table. Like, Walters' knees are gone. He doesn't train very much for Stoke, so he clearly stood up for himself.
Yeah.
The nature of the altercation exactly with Arter, we don't know, but it seems it centres on the same thing, and Arter seems to be feisty enough as well. Now, does Arter need to suck it up and come back into the squad? Possibly. None of us know the answer to that because none of us know what was said, who said it, and how exactly that all transpired. Is this just, as O'Neill maybe suggested today, the kind of scrape that does happen?
Yeah.
Or is this a more serious thing where maybe an apology is owed and it's not forthcoming?
Yeah.
And we don't know the answer to that, but we can't really afford to be shedding all these players.
No, absolutely. And also, you'd have to wonder now, is Roy Keane too major a figure in Irish sport for this kind of role? Like, look over there, there's a Keane jersey, number 6, Ireland jersey with number 6 hanging up there. That's everybody, most of us growing up or over the years, the amount of hero worship of Keane was unbelievable. Like, if you talk to people all through Irish sport, the Paulo Cons, etc., they all idolised Roy Keane. But is he too big for that kind of job? Because there's no more high-profile assistant manager in the world. Like, you don't get many assistant managers doing press conferences all the time. And partly a cynical view is, and there might be some too, that's the FAI. I think he can help sell tickets. But he's one of the best-paid assistant managers around in international football. Yeah. And what is he giving you? Like, why is this needless?
Yeah,
stuff happening?
Usually assistants, when you see them on the international stage, and you saw it throughout the World Cup, they are experts in coaching and they're bringing to the table different ideas, different methods, and they're usually the quiet men in the relationship. They're not totemic figures that are there just on name value.
No, that's what I mean. Is he just too big for that? That's what, exactly.
In the interest of fairness, I think we have to hang on here and see what Arter says about the situation. Roy is probably going to speak to the press over the next number of days. Might well be tomorrow. So we'll have to see. Bumbling rumours then are innuendos or, weighted, I hope nothing has happened with Declan Rice. Issues have been mentioned. And so that was put to O'Neill today. Has there been any situation with Rice and Keane?
O'Neill says there's any summer altercations involving Arter and John Walters had no influence whatsoever on Declan Rice's decision to step away from the Ireland squad. England manager Gareth Southgate confirmed over the weekend that he had spoken directly with the West Ham teenager, but O'Neill says he hasn't had direct contact himself with Rice, just his family.
No, I've not spoken to Declan directly. I've obviously spoken to the family. But Declan's taken a little bit of time. I think that's a totally different situation. Declan's a young fellow at 19 years of age. He is, obviously, we are very, very keen to have him. He has played senior football for us. And of course, when the country of your birth come calling, it stops you in your tracks a little bit. So he's a decision to make. Naturally, we would be delighted if he chooses to come to us, but he might need just that little bit of time to think things over.
There's no Shane Long in that trimmed down Ireland squad. The Southampton striker suffered a foot injury in Saturday's 2-0 win over Crystal Palace.
On O'Neill not speaking to Rice directly, you could argue he was giving the guy space. He let him know that we want him. Southgate's spoken to him directly, but even Southgate said, look, I made no promises to him because I can't even promise someone who's in the World Cup they'll be involved in the year. It'd be unethical to do so. James McLean, it seems, has texted Declan Rice as well. This was revealed. O'Neill said that James McLean has texted Rice to say, look, you may have seen my tweet the other day about, I was agreeing with Kilban, but we want you. I mean, we do want you.
James,
so,
could you text something like?
We don't know if that's how the text starts, so they've put that point to him. I mean, look, if, and it is an if, O'Neill has shot it down there categorically. There was a suggestion in the Mail on Sunday yesterday that Rice had almost been involved in some kind of peacemaker role with the Keane and Arter situation. That's to be confirmed. You heard O'Neill shooting it down there. I mean, look, if something like that was to have been part of the Rice decision, then there'd be a serious issue then, a really serious issue.
Yeah, there would be. And like Brian Kerr brought this up as well on TV3,
Virgin Media 1.
Or Virgin Media 1, sorry, whatever. That
he hoped.
He hoped that there wouldn't be something like that. But at the time, I was just wondering, had Brian heard something when he mentioned that? Like, because Brian would...
But it felt
Well,
loaded.
no, Brian would have his ear to the ground, obviously, in Irish football circles. So I wonder had he heard whispers of something, but we don't know. But it just if it was part of the issue, you go,
yeah,
that's even worse.
No, that would be terrible. So suddenly, Cardiff Thursday, it's actually a big game. I mean, there is potentially, and don't ask me for the permutations, a route through to the European
you've got enough time to
Championships.
explain it.
Yeah, I'll come back. We'll do that on the football show for the full hour. But there is a potential route through to the Euros via this Nations League thingy, and so it is. It was seriously. It is important. It's a competitive game. It's in Cardiff.
What's your favourite thingy?
Don't think I should answer that in camera, Kieran.
They don't want to go out there and put in an insipid kind of performance.
No, they don't. And it's funny because I think a huge effort has been made
by O'Neill
to paint this as a fresh start.
Yeah, well, O'Neill's done the rounds.
Yeah, all the rounds. Yeah, the rounds have been. But even what he was saying in them, like talking about how he would like a possession-based game and getting new players in, and I think that's why this stuff with Keane is particularly bad timing because I think the whole vibe, he wanted this to be a really positive week, has started off with a really downer.
Yeah,
it really has.
No, that's for sure. Okay, we've blathered on a little bit. Rich, you going to rip through some stories there?
Yeah, golf-wise, Rory McIlroy's made a bright start to the final round of the Dell Technologies Championship in Massachusetts. He birdied the second. He's moved to 10 under par. As things stand, he's 5 holes into his final round and he is 2 shots off the lead at the moment, which is jointly held by Abraham Anser, who's already dropped a shot early in his 3 holes. He started off today as sole leader. Tyrrell Hatton and Hideki Matsuyama are the other men currently on 12 under par. And there is another one as well, Bryson DeChambeau, who started just off the lead of Anser. Meanwhile, in the Made in Denmark, Matt Wallace played himself into consideration for a wildcard pick for the European team at the Ryder Cup. He won a 4-way playoff in the final qualifying tournament, that being the Made in Denmark yesterday. Matthew Fitzpatrick's failure to take the title handed the last automatic spot to the Dane Thor Bjorn Olesen. Europe captain Thomas Bjorn will name his final 4 selections on Wednesday. Liverpool captain Jordan Henderson has committed his future to the Premier League club. The England midfielder signed a new long-term contract. Henderson arrived at Anfield from Sunderland in 2011 and since then has gone on to make 300 appearances, scoring 24 times during his spell. And Tottenham chairman Daniel Levy has apologised after confirming all 3 Champions League group stage games will now be played at Wembley. The National Stadium in England is also the venue for their Premier League match against Manchester City. An NFL game at Wembley has resulted in the fixture being put back to Monday the 29th of October, and Levy describes the delays in the completion of the new White Hart Lane ground as disappointing and frustrating.
We're going to have Rory O'Connor talking rugby later on, opening weekend of the Pro 14. There's a few bits and pieces there.
Yeah, plenty of team news knocking around. Jaco Tate could make a first Munster appearance in 11 months this coming weekend. The Springbok centre's returned to the fold following knee ligament injury. Tate was involved in the warm-up for Saturday's thrashing of the Cheetahs at Thomond Park. Munster hooker though Kevin O'Byrne suffered a calf injury at the weekend and he'll be monitored ahead of the trip to Glasgow. Josh van der Fleer is set to make his comeback for Leinster this weekend. The flanker has returned to full training after 7 months on the sideline. He suffered a knee ligament injury of his own during Ireland's Six Nations win against France in Paris. Leinster go to the Scarlets in the Pro 14 on Saturday. And Jordy Murphy could make his first Ulster appearance this coming Friday night. The former Leinster flanker will train this week ahead of the visit of Edinburgh to Kingspan Stadium. Hooker Rob Herring is also in line for a return to the fold in that game. Roger Federer aiming to make a 13th career US Open quarter-final later. The 5-time winner at Flushing Meadow faces the Aussie John Millman. Before that, 6-seed Novak Djokovic takes on the world number 68 Joao Sosa. That match is already underway and Djokovic is up a break and he's about to go 3-1 up in the first set. Kei Nishikori is through to the last 8. He beat Philip Kohlschreiber in straight sets this evening. Madison Keys beat Dominika Sibilkova 6-1, 6-3 to progress to the women's quarterfinals, and she'll face the winner of tonight's meeting of Maria Sharapova and Carla Suarez Navarro.
Rich, thanks very much. Kieran, thanks for coming in.
No
Much
problem.
appreciated. Next up, we'll hear from Jim Gavin, Philly McMahon, Brian Fenton and Mickey Hart as well.
Off the ball on News Talk.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products.